Okay, good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Scott McClanahan, and I'm the Director of Advanced Academics for Waco ISD. Thank you for joining us at our fourth session of our 8-session College Readiness series. This one is Navigating the World of College Testing. Our goal tonight is to help increase understanding of all of the variety of assessments that surround the high school years and the bridge into college, so that both parents and students can best understand what each assessment is for, what it will be evaluating, and what its eventual use is. Our essential questions that we're going to answer tonight are: what are the SAT and ACT, and how are they different, and how do you choose which one to take? What is the ASVAB, and how can it help you? Do you need to take the TSI, which is yet another assessment? What do my PSAT scores mean? And to help me with that, as I said, I'm Dr. McClanahan. I have Ms. Ashley Duncan, who is the Assistant Director of Advanced Academics. I have Ms. Shantae Reed, who is the College and Career Readiness Counselor at Waco High School. And Ms. Brittany Davis, who is the Academic Advisor at University High School. And then Ms. Samantha Smith over here, she's our administrative assistant. If you ever have any questions that have to do with advanced academics or any of our programs, she would be the person to contact. So here's a couple facts about the world of college testing. In 2011, the ACT test became the most popular college assessment in the United States. Since college testing actually began, the SAT had held that position. And for many years, the SAT was plagued by criticism about its elitist nature, that it wasn't very clear on why specific skills were chosen to be tested, and it ran into some problems in 2013 where widespread cheating was reported, especially in its overseas venues. And so it added to the problems that the College Board really faced with the SAT assessment. In 2014, in order to respond to this loss of being the premier assessment, the College Board announced that it would redesign the SAT in an attempt to gain back some student test takers. So it was actually the first change to the test in 10 years. So how did they decide to change the test? Well, the first thing that they did was they removed every part of the test that made it unique. So previously, on the reading section of the test, the first 5 to 7 questions were vocabulary, individual vocabulary questions. Well, one of the things that they'd really been questioned about was who was deciding that those were the words that were important for students to know. For instance, I've been through 2 doctoral programs, and I don't think that I've ever used the word treacly. Yet, somebody chose that to be a vocabulary word tested on the SAT. And so, a lot of people in education and that are critical of testing asked who was making decisions about what was actually being asked of students. They also took out the individual grammar questions. So previously, in the grammar section, there would be a sentence that was given and students were asked to correct that sentence, or they were asked to look at a number of revisions and determine the correct one. If you look at testing across the state, across the nation, state testing, other standardized tests, grammar is not tested that way. It is contextualized within a passage, and students are asked to do kind of a proofreading exercise with the passage. So SAT eliminated those discrete grammar questions. The other thing that made it unique was that the essay component of the SAT was actually calculated into the total score. Students were not given a choice. So if you took the SAT, out of your 800-point writing score, about 65% of that score was the essay. And it was the first section on the test, so it wasn't like you could get up and leave when you got to that section. Everyone was forced to do it, even if the college that you were applying to did not require you to complete the essay. So what did they add? Well, they added all of the things that made the ACT unique. One of those being the tests of graphic reading. So on the ACT, really 2 types of reading are tested. Reading for information, which would be passage reading, we read manuals, books, essays, and then we read for function. So we read timetables, we read menus, we read charts of data. And to be a good college student, students have to have some kind of ability in both of those realms. So on the ACT test, they actually test that functional reading in the science section. But previously, SAT did not worry themselves with that type of reading. Well, when they redesigned, all of a sudden now in the reading passages and in the grammar passages, they actually test graphics. They test graphs of information, tables of data, so that they can do the same type of assessment of that functional literacy. They went to testing grammar and context, just like the ACT had been doing, and the SAT made their essay optional, so that now students can take the SAT with writing or the SAT without writing, just like the ACT has always offered. So, what's the public reaction been to all of this change? Well, first, confusion. A lot of people don't know what's even on the test. Concern. So a lot of people think that by going through and taking out key components of what has been an established assessment for many years, that it is somehow weakening the assessment or making it less rigorous. Condemnation. So a lot of people think that what the SAT is trying to do is trying to make itself more modern, make it really respond to what students are doing in the classroom today, which is met with a lot of criticism. And criticism. You know, we're turning into a testing nation, and the more that these tests come out, they've now come out with not only a new SAT, but a new PSAT, and PSAT 10, 9, 8, 7, and 6. So this growing testing market has really got some people concerned about exactly what students are learning in school. So here's some facts about the SAT and ACT. The ACT and SAT are national tests that are used as part of the college admissions process. The great thing about it is that since they have drawn such fire for cheating scandals, for irregularities in reporting scoring, what has happened is that we have seen across the country college admissions officers really pull back on the amount of stress they put on those scores in the admissions process. And they've started looking at students more holistically, looking at the activities they participate in, the courses that they selected, and really looking at the overall child. One of the big changes over the last 20 years from when I was in high school is that now no college accepts only one of the tests. So when I was in high school, it really depended upon where the college was in the country, what tests they required. If you were going to school, you wanted to go in the Northeast or in the East Coast, you would be required to take the SAT, and that was largely because the College Board is in New York City. If you were in the Midwest, where I grew up, the ACT was the more prevalent test because the ACT company is headquartered in Iowa City. And if you were on the West Coast, it really went by school, and it was really whichever salesperson had done the better job at that institution. But about 10 years ago, we really saw a leveling of the two tests, and colleges pulled back on those expectations, and they will now accept either one. Whereas ACT used to not be as accepted as the SAT, now that it is the more popular national assessment, it is just as accepted. So, how are the two tests the same? Well, the first thing is they're the same in subject matter. Both of them test written expression, reading skill, and mathematics. Language conventions, and they are both nationally normed, which means when they field test them to determine whether or not the questions are valid, they test them in various geographic groups from different socioeconomic levels to make sure that no particular group of students will be disadvantaged by any of the questions on them, and so that they can get a wide representation of students to determine how to set the scoring scale. That national norm actually provides a percentile rank of how students look compared to others of the same grade level. It also ensures fairness among all the students tested. Before I came to Waco ISD, I actually worked for two of the largest testing companies in the United States. So I was the editor in charge of the graduation exam in English for the state of Virginia, the state of Georgia, the state of Mississippi. I worked on the 10th grade California exam, the 9th grade Hawaii exam. In terms of national exams, I actually helped create the prototype that is now used for the Stanford Achievement Test nationwide. And so I have a vast background in testing. And it was often interesting to look at how field test questions would actually come back. When we were testing vocabulary items, for instance, on the Stanford Achievement Test, we found that the word warrior was actually biased against boys, and the word lavender was biased against girls, which would largely be exactly the opposite of what we would expect. And so the data for every single question is carefully examined to look at every subpopulation to make sure that there is no discernible difference in the way in which students score based on the particular group in which they belong. The other thing is that they're both timed tests. So whereas we have the TSI that we'll talk about in a bit that is an untimed test, these are both timed tests. The ACT, the core test, is 2 hours and 55 minutes long, and the writing test actually just changed, and it is now 40 minutes long. The SAT, the core test, is 3 hours long, and the writing test is 50 minutes. So you can see from that, we have, 3 hours and 45 minutes or 3 hours and 50 minutes. So they're relatively equal in length. The other thing is they both now have the optional writing test. So if a student is going to apply to a state school in the state of Texas, every state school requires the writing portion of the SAT or ACT. However, if a student is interested in applying to somewhere like Baylor or SMU or TCU, many of those schools do not require the writing portion. So students always want to check with the college that they're interested in to find out whether or not they need to sign up for that portion. So how are they different? Well, the first thing is the scoring. So ACT scores are actually determined by a score in 4 different domains: English, math, reading, and science. And each one of them is scored on a 36 scale. For the composite score overall, those 4 scores are averaged. For the SAT, students are actually receive 2 scores out of a possible 800 points. The reading and grammar are actually combined together to make one 800-point score, and the non-calculator and calculator math sections combine to make one 800-point score. And so, that should be 1,600, my apologies. They have a high of 1,600 that students can earn. Now that's a change because that happened in March with the new SAT, because it used to be 2,400. The writing section, which included the essay and the grammar, was another 800 points. They've now eliminated that and phased the actual grammar questions into the writing score, or into the reading score. The other thing that's different are the testing procedures. So the ACT test allows students to use the calculator on the entire math section, whereas the SAT does not. The other thing is the SAT focuses on evidence-based reading and writing, whereas the ACT tests look at standard reading comprehension and that functional literacy that I mentioned earlier. The other thing is the philosophy, and this is really what set the 2 tests apart for a number of years, is that the SAT test is what we refer to as an aptitude test. It is designed to determine what a student's level of cognition or thinking ability is. And so, many colleges, what they will do is they will allow a student to superscore the SAT. Scores for the SAT are all reported on one cumulative report. So if a student takes the test 3 different times, if they send their scores to a college, the college will see all 3 scores. And what many colleges allow a student to do is claim their highest reading score and their highest math score and combine those together to become one composite score. because what they're looking for is a student's possible level of thinking. So whether a student shows that on this Saturday or another Saturday, they have still shown what their maximum level of thinking is. The difference between that and the ACT is that the ACT is an achievement test. It is designed to largely test what the students learn nationally in those curricular domains: English, reading, math, and science. And so it is more a test of cumulative knowledge. So one of the biggest ways that this can be seen as a difference is on the math section. At the beginning of the math section on the SAT, students will be provided with a number of formulas. Area formulas, volume formulas, right triangle formulas. And they do that because the SAT doesn't really care whether a student is able to remember a formula. They're more concerned about the thought process that goes into actually applying it. The ACT, however, does not provide students with any formulas. It expects, as part of their learning of math, that they have learned certain formulas, and it asks them to recall those to actually be able to answer the questions. Now, one other difference here is on the SAT math, not only is there one section where they can use no calculator, but on both math sections, there are actually calculable questions where students have to calculate an answer and then grid in that answer. The ACT, however, is completely multiple choice. So that is kind of the give, is that because they're asking students to actually remember formulas that they have been exposed to, they do not penalize them by making them calculate and come up with an answer. They give them multiple choices so that even if they're close to the right formula, they still might get the question right. Now, when and where are the tests offered? Well, for 2016-17, the SAT has 6 dates that are left for this school year. Basically, the SAT and ACT alternate months. So the SAT is given in November, and it has this test in December, which is one of the few times that the two tests overlap. January, March, May, and then they always give an end of the year test in June so that students who are now out of school can take it before they take their summer break. The ACT still has tests left on October 22nd, December, February, April, and June. So they also give that end of the year, right before you start your summer vacation, test. Students can test on the SAT locally at either Baylor or MCC, and the ACT is actually hosted at Midway in addition to those two. So if students go onto the website to actually sign up for the test, they can sign up for any one of those 3 locations. Now, one of the really great things that has happened since the passing of the tax ratification election last year is that now I, through my department, offer the ACT test during the school day to every junior in the district. So on April 19th, which is a Wednesday, every junior in Waco ISD will take the ACT with writing on that day. Now, last year, we offered the ACT alone, without the writing portion. And we did that because it was our first year, we were rolling it out, and, to be honest, for the number of tests that I purchased, it cost my department about $31,000 to pay for that test. This year, what we found, though, was that if a student is going to apply to a Texas school, they need the writing score. So what that did was, it gave our students some practice, but they actually then had to take the ACT again to be able to have a writing score. So this year, what I'm going to go ahead and do is bite the bullet, and I'm going to pay for the whole thing, which comes out to about $58.50 a test, and it'll cost me about $42,000, and I'm giving it with writing this year, so that if a kid is happy with their score, they will be able to take that score and apply right to college. Now, if students are interested in doing some preparation for the tests, for the ACT, and this is something you really want to be aware of, whenever you are going to try to prepare for a nationally normed test, You always want to use the preparation materials put out by the test developer. So I can go over to Barnes & Noble, and I can find on the bookshelf all kinds of ACT preparation books. Princeton Review, Barron's, Cliff's Notes, Peterson's. I can find all kinds of them. But all of those tests, all of those practice books, the items and passages that they have in there are not actual ACT material. They are their version of ACT material. Same thing with the SAT. It's just that publishing company's version of those testing materials. Now, the problem is with that is in many of those books, they then offer a scoring grid. Well, that's actually a scoring grid that applied to another test, not those questions. Another thing is that the questions in those preparation books largely have never been tested on actual test takers. I can tell you that because if you go to Barnes & Noble right now and you pull any Barron's ACT book off of the bookshelf, Barron's ACT, Barron's ACT Math and Science Workbook, Barron's ACT 36, I senior edited those books. So I was the last person to edit them before they went to the bookstore. And I can tell you, there was no field testing that was done in between that. So I put pictures for you on here. If you want actual ACT practice materials, that is the book you want to get, is the official ACT prep guide. And I have given you the ISBN number under it. You can order it off of Amazon, Walmart.com, Barnes & Noble. You can find it in the bookstores as well. In addition, as part of the tax ratification election last year, in order to help our students prepare for the TSI, which Ms. Davis is going to talk about in a few minutes, last January, I purchased the Plato learning software for every high schooler in the district. Well, in that library that the TSI preparation was included, I also got ACT preparation, SAT preparation, and ASVAB preparation. So if your students are interested in any of those, they can actually get on Plato. And the great thing about Plato is it breaks the test down to its simplest skills to help a student really uncover what are the underlying scaffolding skills that they need to work on that are going to help them raise their score overall. And most materials don't do that. If they need to get their login information, they can see Ms. Davis at University or Ms. Reed at Waco High. Also, if you are interested, the ACT does offer an online prep course. It is $39.95 for a year of access. I gave you the web address where you can get on and enroll in that. Or ACT just rolled out last week their brand new partnership with Kaplan. And so they now offer free ACT preparation through that association with Kaplan at that website that I've included for you. For the SAT, this is the only book that you want to get. It is the official SAT study guide, and it is the only one that is out that has the new SAT materials in it. Now, here's the problem, is that when they rolled out the new SAT, at that point they rolled out a new PSAT, so a sample PSAT, and 4 practice SAT tests. So students that were really interested in the PSAT, that was important to them, they used the PSAT practice. And then what we expected was, when we get the little PSAT booklets that we hand out in the school saying the test is coming up, inside of those little booklets, there's another practice test. So we thought, okay, well, if they do that practice test over the summer, another one will come in the fall before the test. Well, when we got those little booklets, the informational booklets, it was the same practice test on the inside. So many students, what they did was they moved over to the SAT materials, because literally the only difference between the PSAT and the SAT is about 15 questions. So if anything, it just gives students more questions to practice on. Well, what they did was they started working through those practice SAT tests, and then the study guide came out, and it's the same 4 practice tests. So one of the disadvantages to really focusing effort toward the SAT right now is the lack of practice material out. There's only one PSAT, plus the one that was given last year that most students have already taken, and then the 4 practice tests. Whereas the ACT has been a very stable form for the last 10 years. They've literally only made 3 changes to the test in 10 years. They made one of the reading passages a paired passage where it has 2 smaller passages. They changed the scoring of the writing, which they have now changed back. And they went to a new writing prompt last September to be more in line with what students are actually doing in school. So, how do you choose which test to take? Well, students really have their choice. So, they can take both tests, a practice test of both, see which one they did better on, and then decide from there. Now, there's where we run into another little problem, is when you're talking about which test did I do better on. Before the new test rolled out, we had a concordance chart, which basically would tell us this SAT score is equal to this ACT score. So a student could take both tests and decide which one they'd scored higher on. Well, in July, the SAT on their website published a concordance chart between the old SAT, the new SAT, and the ACT. That day, the ACT company publicly came out against it, saying that not a single individual from the College Board had ever contacted their research department for a single piece of data to establish that concordance. So if you look at the College Board website now, all it gives you is a concordance between the old SAT and the new SAT. But even that is currently under scrutiny. The latest figures that I've seen have said that the new SAT scores have been inflated by about 90 points. So, again, that's why we're driving down the ACT lane right now and pointing our kids in that direction, because we know colleges understand that test, they understand what the score means, and we want to give our students as many opportunities as possible. If they are looking for other practice materials, students can always email me, and I have practice materials that I can email them back that they can use, be it the ACT or the SAT. Also, if a student is not strong in math, they might choose not to do the SAT, where they are going to be stripped of a calculator for half of the math score. So you want to really think about, where your strength is. So the next test that we're going to talk about on your sheet is the ASVAB, and I'm going to ask Ms. Reed to come up and talk a little bit about that and why a student might want to actually sign up to take that assessment.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Shantae Reed. I am the College and Career Readiness Counselor at Waco High. And we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the ASVAB. I do have my notes here because I partner very closely with the different branches of the military here locally in Waco, and I speak to the MEPS or the ASVAB testing program coordinator quite often. So I try to make sure that I'm giving you most recent information as possible. So, what is the ASVAB? Typically, when I'm talking to students, those that are interested in the military, they're fairly familiar with this is some type of assessment aptitude that students would have to complete in addition to the physical strength training that students will actually go through as they consider which branch of military they're actually going to pursue. You'll see that the ASVAB does stand for Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, which simply is an assessment. It's not a test relative to the ACT or the SAT, but they really do use this information to get at the vocational interests of individuals as they are pursuing a career within the military. The test is used to determine qualifications for all enlistments. It does not necessarily mean that when you complete the ASVAB that you are signing up to enlist in the military. So why would one consider completing the ASVAB test? So we went through and we wanted to kind of pull out some key facts that we have found in terms of research that's been done for students that have actually completed the ASVAB and or just talking to the different military branches. And here's what they have to say is that this truly is a career exploration program. It does enable students to learn more about themselves. Sometimes when students are trying to figure out just simply what they're interested in, what areas should they explore in terms of even a college major, this also can serve as that, as well as understanding what type of vocational opportunities are there when we're talking about the military. Often there is the myth that if you're signing up and enlisting in the military, you're going to be on the front lines going to war and battle. What I'm often hearing about that myth from our military recruiters is yes, that could be, depending on where you score in your assessment on the ASVAB, but the educational part of the military is a really big part that is often not spoken about. And that is where they do encourage not only for students to complete the ASVAB to determine what their vocational career is going to be, but absolutely opportunity to understand that there is an educational component relative to dollars being set aside for students to actually complete their education, albeit a bachelor's of science or bachelor of arts, as well as going even further on to receive a master's degree. So it does let us know here that 76% of students who participated did so because of their interest to make an appropriate post-high school career and educational plan. What I want to point out here too is that 31% of the students who participated did so because of their interest in the military service. So oftentimes on our respective campuses, you will have students that say, you know, I'm really interested in the military, and the next step for us as counselors is to simply introduce the military representatives that come to our campus to those students, and then they begin to have that conversation about what the necessary steps are. And then at that point, students will elect to say, okay, I want to go through the process by which we take the ASVAB. And the ASVAB is actually administered both electronically as well as our paper-based test. It's something that can be administered on the respective high school campuses with the coordination from the actual program managers and administrators from the ASVAB, which is located locally here in Dallas, Texas. Or we've had military recruiters simply willing to take our students to Dallas to complete that ASVAB as well. So you want to be aware of that. 62% of those who participated reported that the ASVAB program really helped them connect their skills and interests to appropriate career choices. And then the latter part that you want to take note of is that 63% of those who participated say that the ASVAB program helped them to consider careers that they had not thought of before. And that is because of the different types of questions that they're being asked to assess and complete when they're completing that ASVAB. Now, when you walked in, I do hope that you had a chance to pick up this book. This book is something that can be found on the high school campuses. It's something that absolutely the ASVAB program coordinator does drop off on the respective campuses, and it's for the students to really read up and learn about what are the different components of the ASVAB. What I want to point out here as well is that this is the website that any student, parent can go to learn about what's included in that ASVAB test, if you will. It does allow students to go through their own self-exploratory initial entrance exam for you to kind of see where you may be interested. And then it breaks it down into 6 different points of interest for you then to explore and understand what types of vocational. So the components on the ASVAB, what I want to point out to you is that while this test is timed, the average amount of time that it takes a student to complete this assessment is about an hour and a half. Now, when I spoke to the program coordinator yesterday, she says to allow at least 3 hours set aside for these students because there is a 45-minute pre-assessment, which is really the profile that the students have to fill out. And again, they're doing that on paper, and that's at the respective campuses. We can set those test dates up and communicate that out to you as students as to when that would be available to you. However, just allot the 3 hours, but typical time for a student to complete this is really about an hour and a half. And the sections are timed. And these are the key areas that they do focus on. So the verbal skills, math skills, science, and the technical skills are the areas that the assessment really does focus on. What I want to point out when we're talking about general science and or the arithmetic, reasoning. Again, these are looking at very specific vocational roles in the military. So when we think about when we're going to college, and even when you're in high school now, and we may say this is your endorsement plan while you're in high school, or we may say these are the 16 career clusters. Some parents, you may have heard that before. When the military is looking to assess your vocational skills, these are really the areas that they're going to be focusing on, and they're really wanting to understand what your knowledge is, what your interest is in those particular areas. The one that I like to point out, that arithmetic reasoning is, what they say is that really is more math word problems that you're really answering. It's not necessarily that long math that you may be experiencing in the SAT or the ACT. This is really summary based, and I would say from a paragraph standpoint, and a lot of the military recruiters is like, this is straightforward math. It's not something that's going to be so hard for you to complete, but it's all around your interests as well and wanting to see how you do. Once a student actually completes the ASVAB, those summary results do come to the school. We then will have those available to hand out to the students. What's important is to understand that there is what's called the AFQT, which is that entrance score that each branch of military is going to be referring to in terms of what your cut score is, if you will, when they're looking at what vocation you would be best suited for, regardless of which branch of the military, but they're going to be looking at that score to determine what's the right vocation that you should consider when you're going into the military. So when you get this summary report, there is also a folder that comes with that for every student that will walk them through on how to really read the results. So at this time, I'm going to transition back to Dr. McClanahan, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about PSAT and the scoring. And if anyone has questions about the ASVAB testing, again, you can see myself, Ms. Reed, and or Ms. Brittany Davis at University High School.
Okay, so the PSAT, one of the questions that I get a lot, and let me see if I actually have it. Yeah. Okay, so what's really the importance of the PSAT? Well, it used to be, before the redesign, that the PSAT was a good indicator of a student's SAT score, that you could take the PSAT, get an index score, add a 0 to it, and it would give you your comparable SAT score. And a lot of students that were really targeting toward the SAT liked getting that early information. The other thing is that for juniors, it is actually the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. And so a lot of students would take it, or their schools would make them take it, to see if they could get into that national merit pool. But really, other than that, the PSAT has absolutely no importance. No one will ever see the score, so it's not something that students really have to depend highly upon. And with all of the controversy around the new SAT and the PSAT and the scoring, as a district, we have really decided to kind of go the course of the ACT. So we have pulled back. The PSAT is an expensive test, and what we were finding was that we were not getting an absurd number of national merit scholars. And I have a little group of students that I've kind of worked with that showed last year that they had some talent on the test, so I go and meet with them for lunch to kind of make sure that they have all of their questions answered. And I had to explain it to them like this. To get in the national merit pool, you have to be in the top 1% on the test. That just puts you in the pool. Then what happens is they take that top 1% and they divide it in half. And the top half of a percent go into the National Merit Scholarship competition. So they are actually contacted by College Board and asked to fill out an application for the scholarship. The lower half of that top 1% become what we call National Merit Commended Scholars. Now, it's nice, it looks nice on a college resume, but it has lost the status that it had, say, when I was in high school. When I was in high school, if you were a National Merit Commended Scholar, schools were fighting over you to give you full scholarships. That is not the case today. What we see today is if students get enough scholarship money from PSAT to actually cover their books, then they've done well. So it doesn't have the same status that it once had. And again, that's because the SAT doesn't have the same status that it once had. So what we have done is we have decided as a district that we are going to test the top 10% of sophomores and juniors at both high schools. And then we have got other activities planned for the other students in those classes. So if a student tests, this is what the report looks like that they'll get back. One of the things that they determined when they went to the new PSAT is that it does not represent the same number of questions that would be found on the SAT. So rather than being out of a 1,600 point scale, it is only out of a 1,520 point scale. So again, it muddies the waters. Students don't know quite so clearly what their potential SAT score would be. So that middle score is actually the combination of the reading, writing score and the math score. And it has the potential to go all the way up to a 1520. They will also give them a selection index, which is out of a range of 180. And that is where they will make the cut to determine what the national merit cut is. That cut is not announced until next September. So the kids take the test this October. Next September, they find out if they made it into the pool. And then it breaks it down into the different domains of the test. And then finally, what students are provided with is the actual answer key and what their answers were on the test. And this test, we are actually able to give back to the students after the test. So we are given a certain number of days that we have to hold the actual test booklets, and then we can give them back. Typically, what we will do is we'll wait until we know that the score reports have been posted on the student's College Board account, and then we will give them back the test booklet so that they can go right into the test and see exactly which questions they missed. So if you have any other questions about the PSAT, I will be glad to answer those. But we have one more test to go over, which you should be familiar with, and that's the TSI. And this one is probably the most important for the largest number of students. So I'm going to ask Ms. Davis to come up and talk about this one so that she can give you a little bit of information about this test and how it's used.
Good evening. I'm Brittany Davis. I'm the academic advisor at University High School. I'm going to talk to you briefly about the TSI and what that includes. The TSI is a Texas Success Initiative. It's the college readiness test for college students to determine if they are ready for college-ready courses or if they need remedial courses. The test establishes reading, writing, and math. For the majority of courses, students only need the reading section, but to be enrolled in an English course or a math course, they do need both the writing and the math sections. How is the TSI scored? The TSI is an adaptive test, which means it changed based on the questions that the students answer correctly or incorrectly, and it's scored on a 390-point scale. If students earn a college-ready score, they are considered TSI complete, and once they are TSI complete in one area, they stay TSI complete. The scores for the college readiness is reading 351, math 350, writing a 5 on the essay, or a 363 on reading and a 4 on the essay score. If a student does not pass one of these sections, they will be transferred into diagnostic questions to determine the weakness and what remedial classes they would be best suited for to prepare them for the college-ready section. So why would anyone want to take the TSI? The TSI applies to both classes taken for dual credit and classes taken at a college or university. In the state of Texas, you must take a TSI to enroll in any courses to determine where the student is placed. Once a student has achieved TSI complete status in an area, he or she is permanently complete, and they never have to take that TSI for that section again, and they can enroll in the college-ready courses. If a student does not pass the TSI, they will need to be in the appropriate remedial college course. Those remedial courses do not receive financial aid funding, so that will be out of pocket for students. They also do not receive credit, so that counts against students in a lot of areas. And just to put that into perspective, in the state of Texas, between 28 and 40% of our students are not enrolled in a college-ready course. They are enrolled in remedial, and that really hurts our students. So if they're able to go ahead and take the TSI test and become college-ready, that's definitely what we want for our district. Students can be exempt from the TSI by achieving identified college-ready scores on the SAT, ACT, or STAR scores. So where is the TSI administered? It's offered at Waco High School with Ms. Shantae Reed, at University with me, Brittany Davis, at Brazos, or at Waco. There's no charge to a student in the district. We offer that test for free. However, if the student waits and takes that test after graduation, there's a $25 fee at MCC. Tests taken at Waco ISD can be accessible to those students once they transfer out, and the student just needs to sign a FERPA release so that we can pass on those scores. And we offer that the test multiple times to these students so they're able to achieve college-ready scores before graduation.